not the enemy of the people. This is incredible to see everybody on a busy day, the last day of 2019, the moments, literally hours before a year of epic change and transformation, where I believe this year, 2020 that's coming, will be a test for us. A lot of people think this election is a referendum on one guy in one office. It's not. This election is a referendum on who we are and who we're going to be to each other. I tell Democrats all the time, we cannot win this election if we define ourselves by what we're against. We've got to define ourselves by what we're for. And beating Donald Trump is important. It's the floor, though. It's not the ceiling. It gets us out of a ditch, out of a gully, but it doesn't get us to the mountaintop. I'm here today to talk to you in this incredible home with this incredible family. And I especially want to thank Henry and Emma for opening up their house. We're going to get together at the end, and I'll explain that later on, because something I had never heard of, a tradition, which we'll talk about at the end of our question and Q&A. But everybody gathered here, this is what excites me. And I tell you, Heather opening up the home, this is more meaningful to me than you know. Because this gathering is not about an individual, it's not about one election, it's really about the traditions of our country. And that's why I want to talk to you for a little bit, not about policies, which are really important. There are urgencies from healthcare to gun violence to climate change. But I want you to know that the way we have always gotten big things done, met big problems, dealt with huge challenges, seized great opportunities, is by affirming the values in our country, by manifesting the best of who we are, by coming together in common cause and common purpose. That's how we get things done as Americans. And so what I want to drive home in my opening remarks, then we can open up to questions, ask me about any policies you want to know, any personal questions, like how much money I save on product every year. Any fair game on anything. But I really want to let you all know why I'm running, and why I'm running is not the ends of driving big policy changes, meeting those challenges, but making sure that we have a candidate in the White House that is calling for what is necessary, as a necessary precondition to getting big things done. We have a challenge in America. We see it in our communities. I was just talking about a friend here about this severed sense of belonging that we have in this country, about this deepening partisanship in our nation, about a tribalism where we are hating each other more and more because we vote differently. Many people are just coming from holiday dinners where you were afraid to bring up politics at the table, for crying out loud. We have a moment in America right now where we agree on so much, but it's not translating into our politics and our policy. We were a country that in good times and bad, we found ways to unite and get big things done. When the Russians put up Sputnik, we didn't tear each other apart. We brought together a bigger table. Heck, we brought Hidden Figures together with astronauts, and we said, Sputnik, we're going to the moon. Beating the Nazis, my Iowa-born grandmother, my grandmother's born and raised in Des Moines, she bragged to the day she died about beating the Nazis, and she bragged that she had her victory garden, and she bought war bonds as a working class woman. Even in some of our darkest chapters in our history, there were times that we came together. Heck, when 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham, this nation rose up its conscience, pricked, and said, this is not who we are. We're not a nation of hate. We're not a nation of violence. And our unity helped us to overcome all the obstacles in Washington. We changed laws. We overcame the longest filibuster in Senate history, Strom Thurmond's filibustering civil rights legislation. That is who we are. When women in a tragedy, in a fire in a factory called the Shirtwaist Fire Factory, were throwing themselves out windows and dying on the pavement below, we are a nation that rose up and said, this is wrong. We changed laws. We established workers' rights and protections. But where are we today? Think about this idea of our nation today. We see people who are slaughtered at a concert in Las Vegas or a nightclub in Orlando, and nothing changes. We see people at houses of worship from a synagogue in Pittsburgh to a church in South Carolina, and nothing changes. We see our children being shot in schools, hiding under desks, from Parkland to Newtown. And we, the strongest nation on planet Earth, doesn't do the things that 90% of us agree should change. No, instead, we send our children to school with the implicit message that we can't protect you, so we're going to send you to school to teach you how to hide. There are now more shelter-in-place drills in our public schools than there are fire drills. What is this election about? This is a moral moment in America. And now more than ever, we need a revival of civic grace. We need a more courageous empathy in our nation. We need to understand that the call of our generation is to put more indivisible back in this one nation under God so that we can accomplish the big things. Now I know this is it's one of these strategies that is not just about how you change America, it's also how you win an election. This is one of the things I have to explain to people sometimes, because the initial reaction often is, in fact, one of my first big town halls here, we had 400 or 500 people in Iowa. At the beginning of my campaign, I am running for a debate stage. I don't know if you all noticed, I'm a big guy. So I'm lumbering, I'm a former All-American football player, former Stanford tight end. The older I get, the better I was. and I'm about to get on the stage, and a big guy puts his arm around me and goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I look at him and I go, "Dude, that's a felony." I said to him, like, "Look, sit down. Let me explain to you that the best way to beat bullies and demagogues, fear-mongers, the best way to beat them is not to be like them. This nation does not need from our party right now a doubling down on trying to out-Trump Trump." And let me tell you, Martin Luther King says more eloquently than I can, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. And this is a four-letter word that I am unapologetic about using in a political context. Unapologetic. Patriotism is love of country. And you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And I'll tell you, love is not sentimentality. It is not weak. It is not anemic. It is the strongest force. It is the force that tears down demagoguery and bigotry and hate. We didn't beat Bull Connor in Birmingham because we brought bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses. We beat him because we had artists of activism that called to the moral imagination of this country, demanded that people got off their couches and joined together in the common cause of beating back that darkness. That's what strength is. It's not weakness. It's understanding that driving out hate with love is directly connected to what Martin Luther King's larger sermon to our nation was. When he was locked in a cage in Birmingham, in that big fight against Bull Connor, it was April of '63, and he sat down, and all the letters he was getting, he chose one group to respond to write a public letter to, and it wasn't to the bigots and the fearmongers and the hate mongers. No, he wrote a letter to good people. The letters from the Birmingham jail are to people of faith. And his big call was, hey, our strength lies in our activism and our connection. You all know, he said it also so eloquently, that what we have to repent for in this day and age, it's not simply the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. Now look at that in our context today. And I don't mean to be critical of us. I'm as responsible as everybody here. The last election, 2016, in some of the swing states like Wisconsin, Donald Trump got less votes than Mitt Romney. And we shellacked Mitt Romney. What happened in 2016, we've got to remember, we had appallingly low voter turnouts. For African Americans, this is why I say, if you're running for president, if you're going to be our nominee, you better be able to excite all of our coalition, including black and brown people. Because if you can't, look what happened in 2016. In Michigan, in Wisconsin, In Pennsylvania, we lost those 3 states by 77,000 votes. There was such a dramatic drop in African-American turnout. In Milwaukee alone, that one city, in that one metropolitan area, over 70,000 less blacks came out to vote. The challenge in this election is not what they are doing, it's what we are going to do together. Because that's how you fight. Not with violence, not with fists, not with hate. You fight by calling to the consciousness of your fellow Americans and engaging them. Look, we didn't beat back those people that were trying to stop women from voting. You think it was a bunch of men in 1920 that got together on the Senate floor and said, okay, fellas, it's time for women to have the right to vote. Let's do it, all right. No! We got suffrage in America because of unprecedented activism and engagement. You think it was Strom Thurmond came down and said, all right, I've seen the light. Let's just give those Negro people some rights. No! It was unprecedented engagement and activism. This is what this election's about. This is why I fight so hard when I'm on the debate stage. Unfortunately, not the last one. But I always calling out this idea that Democrats should not be tearing down the character and the goodness of other Democrats.
Right.
I'm probably in a unique position to be friends, the guy that's friends with most everybody on that stage. Andrew Yang and I were texting back and forth yesterday morning. I've worked on legislation, written bills with all the senators in this race. Joe Biden swore me in on my special election. I don't know if you all know this. I got sworn into the United States Senate on the auspicious day of Halloween. and literally, I raised my hand, and he and I are the best dad joke tellers in this race. And he played it straight. I thought he was going to say my name with a Halloween spirit. Cory Booker. No. Sorry, this is as good as it gets. We are all good people in this race. All of us have careers of service and commitment and sacrifice. I know personal stories about the people that are running. I can tell you things about Kirsten or Kamala or Joe Biden, his public tragedies he's worked through. This is not a time to tear each other down. Show us what kind of nominee you'll be by the way you lift each other up, the way you invite people to come together. We may have differences amongst us, but the differences between us are nowhere near as great as the differences between the guy in office right now who's working to take away our health care, who can't condemn Nazis, who's doing foreign policy by tweet, who denies climate change, who wants there to be more guns available to people who want to do despicable things. The test of this election is a test of our ability to unite. And so this is my reason for running. I'll be honest with you. We all have this 80, 90 plans between all of us. And hey, I'll stand by mine. I think that my plans for gun violence are maybe a little bit better than somebody else. I think some of my pillars of my climate change and environmental justice stands are a little bit different, a little bit better. I can go through that all, but I'll tell you what, when I become your president, I'm going to look at everybody's ideas and steal the best ones I can. That's what we do. Please, make your decision in this election not just on your head, make it with your heart, your spirit, and your gut. Because this is who we are as a people. Our Constitution is a noble document, but its only worth, its strength comes from the spirit of the people who believe in its highest ideals and demand that we as a nation live up to them. Because God, our documents were full of the bigotry of the time. Our Declaration of Independence called Native Americans savages. Blacks were fractions of human beings in our Constitution. Women weren't second-class citizens. We have been at our best in overcoming that kind of bigotry and divisiveness by having people stand up and raise the spirit of this nation higher and better and further. And that's why this living room excites me. Why? This. And this is a story I want to end with, and then let's get to the questions. I get moved by a living room like this because I am here because of a living room like this. I'm not exaggerating. 50 years ago, in the 60s, my family found love in a room like this. They were trying to move from the South to an incredible place, a Mecca. I don't know if you've ever heard of this place. It's called New Jersey. One woohoo. I thank you for that. Thank you. You can always spot a Jersey girl. And they look for places with the best public schools. Why fight so hard for public education? It guided my parents like a light, like a North Star. And they found the communities with the best public schools that happened to be white communities. And every time they show up to a house, a real estate agent would meet them 50 years ago and say, oh, I'm so sorry, this house is already sold, this house has been pulled off the market. My parents were distressed, facing housing discrimination. And so they found this group of people that met in the living room, mostly white folks, who lived their values of welcoming the stranger, who lived their values of loving your neighbor, who showed the kind of patriotism. It may not have been the patriotism of people storming beaches in Normandy who never stopped and asked, hey, are you Republican or Democrat? It may not be the patriotism of people of differences like Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, who died together in Mississippi, black and white, Christian and Jewish. But they lived that same spirit and said to my family, we got you. And they set up a sting operation where they literally would send my parents to look at a house. If they were told it was sold, a volunteer white couple from the living room would go out and see if the house really was for sale or not, and they would ultimately find out that it was. In the house I grew up in New Jersey, my parents were told it was sold. The white couple found out it was still for sale. They put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted. Papers were drawn up. And on the day of the closing, at the real estate agent's office, the white couple did not show up. My father did. And a volunteer lawyer. And they walked into the real estate agent's office and confronted the real estate agent. And the real estate agent was so upset, he should have capitulated, but he didn't. He stands up so angry that he punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And he sicks his dog on my dad. And let me tell you, as I was growing up in this beautiful home, in this incredible neighborhood, every time my dad would tell this story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, son, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. And so this is our story. All of us are here, as my father told me growing up. You drank deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity you did not dig. Look, by the time I was 18 years old, I had 18-year-old swagger. I was president of my high school class. I was honor society. I was going off to Stanford. I got in because of a 4.0 1600. Hold on. 4.0 yards per carry, 1600 receiving. High school All-American football player. I stayed and got my master's, went overseas, Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, came back to Yale Law School, and I'm telling you this in all seriousness, my dad was not impressed. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. Why did I take my Yale Law degree and move to a low-income neighborhood in inner-city Newark, New Jersey, where I still live as the only senator, the only person in this race that lives in a community below the poverty line where we do not mistake wealth with worth? I moved there to represent people against slumlords, to be a tenants' rights lawyer, because people fought for my housing rights. I can't pay it back. I decided at the beginning of my career to start paying it forward. We took down slumlords. How? Together. Organizing people, getting more people involved, tenants organizing. We beat the slumlords. We beat a political machine. How? Organizing. Grassroots, bigger coalitions, beat a machine. We turned around a city, New Jersey's largest city, known for crime and corruption, 60 years of losing population, the lowest ranked urban school system in the state. Now we turned it around. Biggest economic development period in 60 years, tens of thousands of new jobs, a school system that is now ranked #1 in America for beat the odds schools, kids in poverty going on to college. How did it get done? Not because of me, because we created a larger we. I went to the United States Senate, don't get mad at me, but I went down there and asked every Republican I could find to have dinner with me. And it was hard sometimes. Ted Cruz and I went out to dinner together. And it was hard because he's from Texas and I'm a vegan, for crying out loud. Brene Brown says it's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. Ted and I passed legislation together to help communities recover after natural disasters. I go to Bible study in Inhof's office, a right-wing conservative. He and I passed legislation together to help homeless and foster kids. In the Senate, though, to end the story, I decided to do what a lot of senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. But guys, understand the pressure. If your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure. So I went back to find the people that met in the living room 50 years ago. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I never thanked them, and I found the leader of that organization, 93 years old, the woman who led the group in the 60s, and she was easy to find because she still leads the group today. She doesn't represent black folks. Lots of black folks live in Bergen County, New Jersey. She represents same-sex couples. She represents Americans with disabilities. She represents sick and Muslim families. Why? Because she knows that justice has no color, no race, no orientation. It is one justice, one nation, one love. She confirms a lot of facts, but she says, you've got to go talk to the lawyer that formed that sting operation. I call it a conspiracy of love. And so I find this guy, 84-year-old retired judge. And I had to get all the questions I had, a whole bunch of questions for the chapter in the book. But at the end, I had one question I hadn't written down that just jumped out at me, which was a simple question: why? You see, he was a young guy when he first started doing this, that was just starting his career, had just started a business. For any entrepreneurs here, you know how busy that is, all-consuming. He was struggling to make ends meet for his family. And I had to ask him, why then would you spend so much time helping black families move into your neighborhood at a time of fears of white flight? At a time that there was fears that real estate prices would go down? Why would you do it? And he goes, well, I know the moment I made the decision. And I go, what was the moment? He goes, it was March 7th, 1965. And I'm like, that's very specific, sir. What was going on? He said, well, I was just sitting home watching TV. Now, some of you are not old enough to know the hardship of us back in the 60s and 70s in America, because we only had 3 channels, okay? And I don't know if you all know this. This is a serious hardship now. If you wanted to change those channels, you had to get up and go there. I sometimes suspect my dad had my brother and I just so we would get up and change the channel. Most of America is watching a movie that if you're my age or maybe a couple years older, you might be able to finish the title for me. The movie that most of America was watching that night was a movie called Judgment at Nuremberg. Right. And on this very historic day in America, March 7th, 1965, they broke away from an ongoing TV movie, shocking America because they went to a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And these marchers started in Selma and were trying to get to Montgomery. They got stopped on that bridge, tear gas shot at them, and then people charged in, Alabama state troopers with billy clubs, just starting to beat those marchers over the head. One of those people who had his skull fractured fell to the ground, bleeding profusely, had to be carried unconscious back to a church for shelter. He's one of the greatest heroes this nation has ever had, who right now is struggling with pancreatic cancer. His name is John Lewis. One of my heroes of life. And so what does a white guy on a couch 1,000 miles away do when he sees this? What does he do in our nation's moral moment in his generation? What does he do? Does he just watch TV and say that's a shame, someone should do something about it? No. Does he allow his inability to do everything to undermine his determination to do something? No. He stands up. His first reaction in his gut is, I'm going to Alabama. Then he laughs at himself. He can't close his business down. Heck, he can't even afford a plane ticket. But he does that noble tradition, which is why every one of us is here. Not because of who presidents were or senators were. Not because of people with titles after their name. Not people who had multiple degrees. That's not America. America's a tradition he showed in that one moment, which is, you know what? There is an injustice in our land. I may not be able to do everything, but I am going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And he calls around because he figures he could spend 1 hour more a week 1 hour a week of pro bono work. He calls around to see who needs help, and he finds this young woman, now 93 years old, but this young woman is like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, I need some help. And the two of them start plotting this sting operation, this conspiracy of love. And they go to work, 65, turns to 67. They start filling a living room like this with people who want to be a part in this moral moment. They want to do their part. He says by the time 1969, everything was set, and they get this case file handed to them of this family coming from the South who's distraught, who's discouraged, who feels just frustrated that they can't find housing. And he says, Cory, we helped that family. We got them a home. And you know the names on that case file? And I go, no, sir. He goes, there were two names on that case file, and the names were Cory and Carolyn Booker, your parents. I am literally standing before you right now because of a living room like this. No question in my mind, I'm standing before you right now because one man on a couch, years before I was even born, decided to stand up for his country. Not for the worst of who we are, but the best of who we are. Not reflecting the hate of a moment, but standing up for the larger cause of love in our country. I am literally the fourth black person ever elected in our Senate's history. I literally could be the first American who was a descendant of American slaves to be in a White House built by slaves. And so, we are going to talk about policy, but I would be remiss if I didn't make this ask. We are 34 days from the caucuses in Iowa. In Iowa, y'all, I love y'all, not just because my ancestral roots here go back to Buxton, Iowa, for crying out loud. But I love this state because you don't care about national polls, you care about people. Yes. From John Kerry, who in December was polling at 4%, went on to win in Iowa, to some guy who married up. I miss Obama. And I miss her husband too. National polls had him about 20 points behind Hillary Clinton in December of his year. You guys look at the people. You look at the heart. You look at the spirit. We're surging in the state now. We're now at the top in local endorsements. People like the Assemblywoman who introduced me, the representative who introduced me. We just picked up county chair people across the state in our last bus tour who are endorsing us. We are seeing incredible surges, but what we need ultimately is people to caucus for us. If you feel the connection to my heart and my spirit, we can talk about my head in a few minutes. Please caucus for me. We have volunteers and activists here that will sign up your clipboards. We will stay in touch with you for the next 34 days and beyond, because you're stuck with me. Once on the Booker team, always on the Booker team.
All right.
We are going to set off a spark in Iowa that's going to ignite this nation. Because I don't care what anybody says. It's not the loudest voice. It's not the person with the most exciting or revolutionary policy plans. This election is going to define the character of our country, not just the Democratic Party. If you believe in me and the values of grace and decency, if you believe in the urgency to activate people from the couch into the field, if you believe in those things, please caucus with me. But no matter what you decide to do, this I promise you, if I am the nominee, if I am your next president, after years of demeaning and degrading and dividing, I will spend every day of my presidency and beyond uniting this country again, bringing us together to common cause and common purpose, because one person can't tear us down. When all of us come together, I know we will rise. Thank you. Thank you. Some people were clapping, which I really appreciate. Two people had their hands up already. And so I'm going to go, I was very attracted to tall, big, bald guys. So I'm going to go to the handsome man right there. And then I saw you next, so you're number two, okay? Yes, sir.
I wish my wife would have come. First of all, give Sydney a huge raise. She's the reason I'm here today.
So I want you to know, we pay well, but the benefits were the hugs.
second thing, to the point, I am a kind of a classically undecided guy. I started out, I was all Joe, let's get through this, and I developed a lot of doubts. I'm not in Bernie's corner, I'm not in Elizabeth's corner, I don't think they're electable. I got 4 people I'm looking at. I'm looking at you, I'm looking at Pete, I'm looking at Amy, and I'm still looking at Joe.
Okay.
Can you give me a 30-second elevator pitch as to why I should caucus for you?
Yes. So I just want you to know I'm looking at you.
That's why I'm tall.
We have impossible challenges before us. Pick the candidate who's best found ways out of no way and done things that other people consider were impossible. If you knew Newark's reputation, in fact, here's an assignment for you. It's not 30 seconds, it's 87 minutes. Watch the Oscar-nominated documentary called Street Fight. Okay? And I'll tell you right now, I'm proud to have been, this is how I beat a machine in Newark. I'm sad to say it lost in the Oscars to a movie called March of the Dagdab Penguins. But you will see where Newark was, and now where we are right now. People said the things we did could not be done, and we did them. We excited the moral imagination of this country. We got help from coast to coast, people all coming to Newark to invest in our city's transformation. We did that because we created a light there that could not be resisted. We went to the Senate. People told me, I had people in my own caucus telling me that we would never pass comprehensive criminal justice reform that would liberate people from prison because of the specter of Willie Horton and more. And I said, no, we are going to do this. We're going to pass just laws that gets thousands of people out. And it took me years, but we got it done. And so I just simply say there's a lot of good people in this race. But if you want to know a guy who's gone into the most difficult of circumstances, I didn't start my career in any place easy. I went literally to the projects, started organizing, beat a machine that was the toughest. You'll see violence and my phones tapped and police being used to try to stop us. We overcame the biggest kind of bully politics imaginable. And then we had the challenge in a recession of turning around a city, the largest in our state, known for crime and corruption. We did that. My whole career is about running at the toughest challenges, bringing together new coalitions to overcome them. And I like this last point. I will not demean and degrade anyone, not even Republicans, because this is the truth. 60 million people who voted for Donald Trump are not our enemy. This country has to have a party that doesn't say our job is to beat the other party. No, this is not a time to beat Republicans. I want to send Mitch McConnell to the back bench, and we will. But this is a time not to say that our call is to beat Republicans, our call is to unite Americans. That's what makes me different.
Thank you for being here, Senator. 2 weeks ago, my friend's mom was deported to Honduras after raising her family here for 20 years. Walking through that process with her family is the most helpless I've ever felt. How are we going to come together and welcome Americans like Carmen as citizens of this country?
So I just want you to know, when you hear things like that, and thank you for speaking from your heart as well as your head. Look, I'm sorry, if America has not broken your heart, if America's not broken your heart, you don't love her enough. Because there are heartbreaking things every day that to me are such a violation of our values. The story you just told is not in any way unique. In my state, stories pop into our press when they're taking away a family member away from their children who've done no crimes but being here undocumented. And the children, often American children, now are being traumatized by having a parent forcibly removed and deported. It's worse than that. I was with some activists in Nevada, and there's a 14-year-old near me with all adult activists, and when she spoke up, I'm not an easy guy to make her cry, but I couldn't hold it together. Because she starts telling me about her other friend who was assaulted, but wouldn't go to the school authorities or the police because her parents were undocumented, and she was terrified. This is an American citizen born in our country, terrified to call authorities because she thought her parents would be deported. We are less safe because of these laws. In my community, the immigrant community is no longer cooperating with police. They're afraid. This president's policies violate our values, make us less safe, hurt our economy. The bipartisan bill in 2013 that passed through the Senate, I'm not exaggerating, would have cut $1 trillion off of our deficit. The Center for the Budget, the CBO said, the Congressional Budget Office said that would have done. So enough of this. If I am your president, immediately, with executive action, I would take the steps to help those 3 things: affirm our values, help our economy, and keep our country more safe. And by the way, before this demagoguery that you've seen now of immigrants, Republicans used to be those folks. George Bush literally did Pathways to Citizenship. This used to be a bipartisan area because we are a nation of immigrants. And as a guy who lives in the state that literally has the Statue of Liberty's back, I will make sure that torch goes higher and is more proudly. Okay? Yes. Please.
You mentioned executive action.
Yes.
And I know a lot of the candidates are talking about that, and certainly our current president talks about that as well. How, if you're president, are you going to make sure that the checks and balances between the different branches of government are respected, and that you work with those other branches in a way that lifts us up instead of maybe, strengthening the presidency, which could have problems in the future?
Yeah, I love this question. As a former legal scholar and now senator, we're too far away from each other, but I would like to hug you as well. And in the back, I would like to hug you too. He's like, that's okay, buddy. You're winning this. So really quick, there's again, I love my fellow candidates. We all, if you look at our list of executive actions, they're very similar. All of us are going to do everything in our first month from put our brave soldiers, transgender soldiers, back into the military. All of us, and allowing mine companies to dump into rivers. He relaxed those rules that are polluting our water. There's so many executive orders that we're going to put in and reverse. But your question is so important because under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, we have seen the erosion of our constitutional separations of powers and the expansion of the executive. And the most horrific area, again, Democrat and Republican presidencies have done this, has been expanding the war powers of the presidency. We are a nation that believes to go to war, it is not vested in the executive, it is vested in Congress. But that's no longer the case. We now have presidents, plural, that are doing things that I believe have violated that. The most horrific example that I can think of right now off the top of my head is Yemen. Did we ever declare war on Yemen? No. But we have been participating. Our fighter jets have been refueling our military planes have been refueling Saudi bombers that have been dropping American bombs on Yemenis children, leading to the deaths of tens of thousands of children, both from cholera and dysentery, as well as from the immediate impact of a bomb. No vote in Congress on that. Finally, after working hard, myself and others in this race, we finally got a bipartisan condemnation of this action. But still, we have not done things to rein in that executive power. So this is my commitment to you. I take those separations of power very, very seriously. I believe if I don't do something about it, the slow, as Rachel Maddow calls it, the drift will continue. Not only will we see massive military expenditures, which are unjustified, but we will also see us continuing to call a global war, having military engagements in places that we don't even know we're in. This is unacceptable. I will call for, in my first months in my presidency, a new authorization of the use of military force to reverse the horrific ones that were done in 2001. And I say horrific because they had no time limitation, no geographic limitation, and have given license to presidents to declare what people are calling the forever war. That must stop, and that's my commitment to you as your commander-in-chief. Yes, I'm sorry. I keep, and the glasses as well, I keep skipping over you. But we're going to go 1, 2, 3 if you don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay. We talked last week, so when I grew up on an Iowa dairy farm, and I helped in the barn, and when I went to school and studied Iowa history, we were called the breadbasket of the world in Iowa. Now we are facing foreign purchases of our land, huge corporate farms, our waterways are toxic, our drinking water is toxic. We're just one little space in this country that is being ruined by corporate America and foreign influence. What do we do about ag policy in your administration?
So I just want to tell a little embarrassing story. The Senate floor has all these very strict rules. And so I've been one of the leaders of activism in this space, which I'll talk about the policy in a second. But I got the highest legislative award from the Farmers Union. And they came in, a lot of Iowa leaders of the Farmers Union here and others, they came in, they gave me this really nice award. I was really grateful. and I joked with them about senators taking all the credit for the work of their staffs, but they gave you a button to wear that was their Farmers Union emblem. And I go onto the Senate floor, and I suddenly see people, all the sort of sergeant-at-arms staff starting to look worried, and finally they come over and say, Senator, that is an inappropriate pin to wear on the Senate floor. And I look down and I realize that the Farmer Union emblem is 2 big letters, F-U. So, look, I make no apologies. I am a New Jersey senator that now leads in the Senate in ag policy because of the horrible things that are going on. Einstein talked about the delusion of separateness. This idea that somehow we're separate, that what goes on in Iowa farms doesn't affect people in inner city New Jersey. It's one integrated food system. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is what's happened to the producers of our food in our country. Their share of the consumer dollar, when my folks go to the supermarket, has gone down upwards of 50% in a short period of time, as corporate consolidation is taking over farming in America, driving farmers at unprecedented rates out of business because they're squeezing them. The cost of their goods, companies like Monsanto have bought up all the other companies and are raising costs of seeds and chemicals and source products. They used to, I sat with Republican farmers who told me stories about their parents used to have 5 people to sell their food to sell their beef to or their pork to, which was exciting for me as a vegan. And now they have 1 person to sell it to. I had a Republican farmer in western Illinois, Farmer Jones, I will never forget him, complain to me about the fact that these beautiful cattle, beautiful pigs, I found them utterly amazing. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to milk these jokes for you. I'm sorry. But told me that he used to be able to fish from his creek, drink from his well, and now he can't because of a massive CAFO that moved in. And so I'm not waiting till I'm president. I've already put the legislation in, leading on the legislation to stop, to put a moratorium on corporate consolidation in the ag market, to start using the Packers and Stockyard Act as it was intended to stop this kind of monopolization in this sector. But I've gone further. This has gotten me upset with some of the big corporate farms because I've now put moratoriums against these large CAFOs that are coming up and giving power back to the contract farmers who know they're really like sharecroppers. Contract farmers now, with these big multinational corporations that dictate to them everything, they live massively in continuous debt, and they're not being able to do what our heritage was, which was the original entrepreneurs to make a living. And we talked about this a little bit in the garage as well, about the appalling suicide rates in rural America and the kind of things. This is all connected. And so as a senator, I've already distinguished myself as a senator leading on these issues. But God, please give me the power of the presidency. Because we are going to go after this kind of corporate consolidation in our culture and stop it and restore farmers. And the last thing I'll say, because I don't know if we'll get, I know we're winding down towards a very important moment in the year. And I want to get through these last 2 questions, but I just want to pivot on this to environmental issues. There is no way out of our climate crisis without having farmers leading the way out of it. There's no way to get out of our water crisis. And for those of you who don't know we're in a water crisis, we are in a clean water crisis in America. We are in a soil crisis in America. With 60, 70 years left, they say, of the kind of soil that our farmers in the Midwest have been really relying on. The way out of all these crises, the only way to do it is to have farmers lead. There are incredible innovative practices. Some of it's now no longer even innovative. No-till crops or cover crops that can actually help pull tons and tons of carbons out of the air sequestered in our soil. There are practices to preserve water runoff and preserve our lakes and rivers. But this is my approach to it. The way we're going to do this is very simple, not costing you guys taxpayer dollars. We are going to take away all the continuous incentives, billions of dollars of taxpayer money we're paying to oil companies and other extractive industries to drill more, drill more, drill more. They don't need our taxpayer dollars. Companies like Chevron pay negative in taxes. In other words, they get more in our federal dollars than they pay in taxes. We're taking all those streams of revenue away from them and we are going to pay farmers to do the kind of soil conservation, regenerative practices that help us to lead the way out of the climate crisis. It's going to create new revenue streams for our farmers, and it's going to accelerate, supercharge the practices that we need to begin to protect our environment. Okay? Oh my God, I'm excited. We're running early. Keep going.
Okay. Question I have is, I met a neighbor of mine. He's originally from Sudan, and he came here 15 years ago. He graduated from Iowa State. He wants to go back to Sudan with friends and try to fix this country. Now we have problems. It's not just Sudan, Central America, Honduras, Mexico, where we find we have a lot of people who are coming in for asylum, which I don't blame. So what can you do to help these people who want to go back to the country to help fix it, and to get rid of the corruption that's there, to get rid of the gangs, the mafias?
So you know the parable. I think it's an African parable. This is your friend? What's your name, sir?
I'm Don. I think I met you in Newton.
We met. I saw you. We met before.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to her?
Yeah. Actually, my name is Don Alvin. I'm here, and she's my neighbor.
Yes. Dol, have you ever thought about cutting your hair even closer?
What she's saying actually is some of the things that we discussed together as the problem of the migration. That immigration is a problem here in the U.S., but the cause is back from countries where refugees come here, or those who are forced migrants that come to the United States. There is a problem in the country. For example, in South Sudan, where I come from, there is tribalism. People are fighting with tribes, and it forced a lot of these poor people out. So you find yourself in the United States, Europe, or somewhere. So what we are saying is that there is the cause is inside, and bringing people, it doesn't solve the problem.
No.
So what she's asking is that what would you do to actually address the real problem?
So thank you very much, Dol, for that question. I just want to thank Iowans. You guys are always setting the standard on women's rights, abolition, the Underground Railroad right through the state, LGBTQ rights, and you guys also have the distinction of the first Sudanese elected official, Mazahir, in this state. You guys did that as well, and so it's great to see the Sudanese community integrating into the Iowa community in ways now that you're seeing the leadership rise up. I was the leader in the Democratic Party of the Africa subcommittee. I know a lot about these issues, and this is what I wanted to say about foreign policy for the United States. Is there's a parable about a man walking along the river, sees a baby in the water, jumps in the water, saves the baby. As soon as he gets to the shore with the baby, sees another baby in the water, jumps back in the water, saves that baby, gets into another baby, and now he's getting exhausted going back and forth saving babies. And then he sees another man walking along the riverside, and they connect eyes, and he goes, "Get in the water, help me out." And the guy goes, "No," and he starts hurrying away, and he screams at him, "How could you be so ungrateful? How could you be so callous?" And the guy stops and he goes, no, I'm not helping you get the babies out of the river, because I'm going up to the top of the river to figure out why the babies are being put in the river in the first place. This is a problem with our foreign policy. It's often too reactive. And we see this in Central America. We see this in refugee crises in Africa, is we sit back and we wait for a crisis to bubble up to a point where it becomes something that the international community has to intervene in. I've been calling in a bipartisan way with great leaders like Jeff Flake in the Senate for us to take a far more activist role in helping with Sudan. I battled this administration to please use your State Department and to put an official in charge of peace in that region like we had under the Obama administration, to begin to look at a special envoy to begin to work on those issues. But we're not. This president, he goes, America first. America first policies is America isolated, America alone. As opposed to what we need to be is understanding that we have a role to play, that when you have festering challenges and problems, the more that you leave them be, the more that they can burst and explode and cause crises even in our country. We see this in further southern Africa with just the Ebola crisis. Under the Obama administration, we were leaning in, trying to stop those infectious disease. Now we're pulling a lot of our resources out to stop this crisis. Well, this is something, infectious diseases do not know borders. And with international travel, it makes no sense. We see this in in El Salvador. We see this in Honduras, where they have crises in those countries, where our country now is pulling resources away from those countries, which is going to not do anything to stop the migration crisis towards our border. So I want you to know, with Africa issues, it's an area of expertise for me. On foreign policy as a whole, I'm going to make sure we tighten our alliances so we as a global country, especially developed nations, understand their obligations. Because so many of these crises can be sourced back to the colonial era when people were slicing, dividing Africa up in a way that made no sense and caused a lot of the seeds for crises we're seeing right now. We are in an interwoven globe. We all have a responsibility for each other. Love of country is a wonderful thing, but love should never stop at our borders. And I will be a much more active president of my State Department, foreign aid and involvement. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, it's you. I'm sorry. Forgive me. And then we'll get some gender balance, sir. I'll come to you next. All right.
What did you think about Joe Biden's comment about he would consider choosing a Republican running
Hold on. Did you guys hear this? What did you think of Joe Biden's comment that he would consider a Republican running mate? And I know instinctively it might make a lot of us say, no way, no way. I think it was great. I literally think it was a great comment. We should not be reflexively partisan. And there are great Republicans around this country who have valuable ideals. I really want to have Republicans in my cabinet. People that I know and honor and trust and are governed by the same values as me. There's great partnerships to make. So I'm not one of those people that reacted in any way negative. The fact that he would even say that, by the way, should he be the nominee, I doubt it will happen. But the fact that he's willing to start talking to the division in our country, I think is really, really important. And again, I am going to choose people not in my cabinet and my vice president, whoever she'll be. I'm going to pick people first and foremost because of their core values, their moral compass, before I start looking at party or anything like that. Okay? Yes. I love this room here. This is like all women's questions, but I'm going to get this one guy in and I'm going to come over here. And then I got my cousin's going to ask me a question. This is exciting. Go ahead.
Thanks. Stock markets are about to end the year at record highs.
Yes.
But only half of all Americans own stocks. I want both. I want my accounts to keep growing, but I want more people to enjoy it. How do you do that?
Oh, this is an issue I've been looking at for a lot of my time in the United States Senate about what's the changes in our stock market culture. We showed this, we elevated a study that showed that 84% of CFOs say they're making decisions that are not in the long-term interest of their company, but in order to make what they're incentivized to do, which is the next quarterly report. We have a short-termism in our nation that is eroding common sense and even the long-term strength of our companies. So consider me like the maven in Omaha, this person that believes in long-term investing and the strength of American companies in a competitive world. I believe we have a stock market right now that drives us towards some of the worst of our behavior, but at the same time, our working-class people in my city who have pension funds that they've been paying into that need security, we do want to make sure our stock market is strong. So specific answer to your questions, a few things we have to do. Number one is we need to be understanding that we are a capitalist society, and it's really important. This is our last debate stage. I said, hey, look, Senator Warren, I don't agree with your tax your wealth plan. I want to tax the wealth, but I want to do it in a way that we can actually raise the highest marginal rate, ordinary income being taxed, investment income being taxed like ordinary income. I want to do all the ways that we can get more revenue in without undermining a lot of I think the fundamentals of our capitalist system. But I also know when I stand up in an inner city Newark, my church, my black church, if I said how many people in this church want to be entrepreneurs, like more than half people's hands will go up because we have those capitalist instincts. And the problem we have right now is new business starts are going down in America. Companies are deciding not to go public. And when they do decide to go public, they're doing it far later in the process when all the profits have been sucked out by the early stage investors. These are all things that actually make our stock market less healthy and do not create that entrepreneurial culture in our country that we need. I want to start expanding it so we have more people that can get in our capital system. Because yeah, my city wants to raise the minimum wage, but nobody aspires for their children to have a minimum wage job. They aspire for their children to have wealth and prosperity. So I want you to know that I, as a guy who turned around an economy, had a city that was just falling and turned it around dramatically, I'm very sensitive not to confuse, as I said, wealth with worth. I want us to create a wealthy society and have metrics. Stock market is an important metric, but have a totality of metrics about the well-being of our society. I think that will make us far more wealthy. I think it will secure long-term business growth for your stock, for anybody here that owns stocks. But more importantly, I think we'll create a culture of more shared wealth. Okay? And if you want to talk more, this is a subject that I have thought a lot about policy, and I would love to talk to you more about it as well. All right, we're going to come over here, and then my cousin. Yes. Well, you could be my cousin, too. All right.
By the way, you're selfie with me in Iowa. You told my daughter and your mother wrong.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. I have a tendency to steal people's phones and do videos. So.
I actually do have a question.
Please.
I am very concerned about voter suppression.
Yes. Did you all hear the question in the back there? Some people are saying no. She said, how is it that you're really so handsome? Okay. Yeah, no. She's asking very seriously about voter suppression.
Okay, so I'll say that. Okay, so even the Federal Election Commission doesn't have a quorum to look into this. And I want to know, I mean, I just see this nonsense going on. Guess who's doing it?
Yeah. Well,
and I want to know specifically what can be done so that the votes are counted appropriately in the next election. In general, what can you do and what can I do?
Oh, I love that question, the way you phrase that. What are you going to do and what can I do more of? So whenever I get that statistic about the massive drop-off of African-American voters, like 1 million less African-American voters in 2016 versus 2012, I want nobody to get this impression that I'm criticizing Hillary Clinton. There were a lot of things that were going on to suppress African-American turnout. There are a whole bunch of, 40% of our internet is bots, and a lot of them are foreign bots, as well as other schemes to target African-Americans on Facebook pages and the like, trying to turn them off from coming out to vote. But this is the thing that you're really talking about, is that there is, amongst some Republicans in positions of leadership, this idea that they can't compete if there's a fair playing field. They just can't, they're thinking now, oh gosh, demographics are changing. The only way we can succeed is by doing things to make it hard for people to vote. And that's why when this Supreme Court decided to gut the Voting Rights Act, before the ink was even dry, you started seeing laws being changed from North Carolina to Texas. North Carolina changed its laws so obviously that a federal judge said you have designed your law with surgical-like precision to disenfranchise African-American voters and threw it out. However, with this new Justice Department, under the Trump administration, they've pulled away all of their fighting for voting rights in this cases. They're not taking them to federal court anymore. And so this worries me for this election and then what's going to happen afterwards. So for this election, there is incredible work going on. Stacey Abrams, for example, is leading the charge in Georgia. And so one thing you can do, and this reminds me, I've got 12 more hours to make my charitable contribution. So I always going to say, this is what I'm going to do, and I would ask you to do the same. I'm going to donate before the night ends to the 501c3 that Stacey Abrams has, fighting for voter protection. We all could do that. And I should practice what I preach. So that's one thing that you can do and I can do. Find the organizations. There are pro bono law firms. There are people scouring the country right now in the trenches trying to protect our elections in this process. The other thing to do, again, John Lewis beaten down for voting rights, but that didn't stop people from going to the polls to vote. So please do everything you can to help local voter turnout organizations. I am one of those people like Barack Obama that is dating up. My girlfriend's a woman named Rosario Dawson, who is charitable and merciful in dating me. And she runs a Latino organization. She's founded a Latino organization called Voto Latino, which does the same thing to activate Latino voters. So find those organizations and support them. But I'm telling you right now, if I'm the nominee, we're going to do even more to protect elections and to excite black and brown turnout like it's never been before. Because when I become your president, my Justice Department is going to go to work in battling this. And my Congress, this is why we have to win North Carolina. We have to win enough Senate seats to get back the Senate. Which means, hold on, the other thing that you can do for me, because I want to pass new voting rights legislation, the other thing that you can do, connect these things, is win the Senate seat here in Iowa. All right. My cousin. I'm doing well. Yes.
Something that so many baby boomers and older
Yes.
depend on. It's normally their only source of income that they have.
Yes.
It keeps increasing. They say it's keeping up with inflation.
It's not.
But it's not. They give you a small raise and then...
Are you talking about Social Security or Medicare?
Social Security.
And Medicare. Okay.
They give you a raise and then they take it away with a deduction.
Okay. So this is a really important area that I've done policy work as a senator and I have a very aggressive agenda. We are a nation that does not take care of its seniors with honor and respect. We have millions of seniors that are effectively below the poverty line because their Medicare and Social Security does not go far enough and it's not keeping up with inflation. We have these terrible laws in our country that from outside of this nation and other developed nations, it seems shocking that we would have a nation that says to our elders, if you want to qualify for Medicaid, to go to a nursing home or something like that, you have to bleed through all of your savings and go into poverty, and then we're going to kick in support. Other countries, what are you doing to people who've worked hard all their lives to save something to maybe pass on to their kids? You're driving them into poverty in order for them to get the kind of health care that they need. Then there's something else we do. I'm going to go through all these really quickly, but I just want to tell you some of the shameful things our country does. My mom had to take care of my dad with Parkinson's and dementia. And so she's now home with my dad. Painful moments for her. From draining through a lot of her savings to even her physical health. I mean, so those people who dealt with folks with dementia, my dad's a big guy, trying to block the door because he's convinced he has to leave the house and do something. He's half dressed and she ends up having to wrestle with him. And so we have people all over America who know this difficulty. And they want to be home with their special needs child or their special needs spouse or a parent as well. But yet when they stay home, our society says, you're on your own. Think about this for a second. That is work. And that is challenging. And by the way, if they weren't doing that, that person with special needs would often end up costing taxpayers so much more money. And so I have changes for all of these things, starting with Social Security and Medicaid. They're not Medicare. They're not keeping up. I'm going to change that. I'm going to lift the cap on Social Security so the highest earners in our country are paying more into the pool so we can increase Social Security that no one on Social Security in America ever is below the poverty line. I'm changing that right away. And Medicare, number 2, we are going to do things to drive down the costs that are associated with Medicare because Medicare is not free. No, it's not. People getting caught up in prescription drug costs and more, we are going to drive those down as well. For long-term care, for anybody in this room that knows the challenges of long-term care, the Carpenters are here as well. They've taught me about people that have children who might have serious mental illnesses. We are going to change long-term care in this country, which will be more economical for this country. Number 1, if you are a home caregiver for anybody with special needs, you are going to qualify for my expanded earned income tax credit, which you're not now, which will bring thousands of dollars of income back into your family, which is going to lift people out of poverty and help secure families that are in crisis because of home health care giving. Number 2, we're going to end this driving people into poverty by lifting your savings cap and even your income cap for you to qualify for a lot of the services that Medicaid provides, okay? All right. Okay, so then we're going to do one more question. I'm going to sum up. Then we're going to do selfies. If you want to take a selfie, then we have to stop at a specific moment for something I've never heard of at 11:59 called New Year's Eve. Yes, Emma and Henry are ready to teach me about New Year's Eve, where we will count down to noon, which will give us 12 more hours of 2019 before the year of our salvation, 2020. So last question. Where are we going? I gotta be a guy. Go ahead.
Type 1 diabetes for 25 years. The cost of insulin is the same one for almost 22 years now. It's gone up 1,200%. What are your plans for not only insulin, but just so many pharmaceuticals bringing that down for the rest of the world?
We are seeing people profiteer off of our pain. Plain and simple. the shocking truth, if you just went miles north, across the border to Canada, your insulin would be 1/10 of the cost. Now, please tell me, there's no justifying that price gouging going here when you have the same company selling at one price here and another price in Canada. And by the way, for a lot of drugs, our taxpayer dollars are going into the development of the drugs. This is robbery. It's theft, not just affecting individuals. This is crushing our economy. It's one of the biggest drivers for the costs of Medicaid and Medicare. And so I have some very harsh ways of dealing with this. And there are executive powers I have to declare a drug essential to national safety. I can take patents away from people. Hasn't been used to my knowledge in our modern presidency. Oh, but it's going to be used when I'm president of the United States. I believe strongly in taking away patents for folks. I'm also going to drive legislation through. Get me to 50 votes in the Senate, I can pick up Republican support for saying to prescription drug companies, if you charge a price for a drug in our country that is higher than in peer nations, we are taking away your patents or doing 100% tax on your profits over that area. We're going to pass that legislation. And then I'm going to do the common sense stuff as well that all of us senators are in this race are on bills to do things like allowing importation. I wrote the bill with Bernie Sanders to allow importation. Oh, and we're going to do things like letting Medicare and Medicaid negotiate down prices. This is a pain point across the board. I'm going to lead that charge and be very draconian when I'm president because the people right now who are suffering in my city and I know in your community, rationing their insulin makes no economic sense whatsoever. It puts people into the hospital emergency rooms where healthcare costs go up even more so. In fact, private companies now are realizing the cost of people not regularly taking their insulin, and as an incentive, they provide it for free. So their cost curve is bending down. So we're going to make economic sense. We're going to make sense for your well-being, your health, and we're also going to make moral sense as well. Okay? I want to end with this. I just want to make my appeal one more time about what this election is about. It is about our values, and the question that was asked over here about our immigration laws, about this idea of the things that break us up, the things that are heartbreak. And before we go to the high of next year, I want to just reflect for you in a moment of one of my hardest, toughest moments as an American when I felt like giving up on this country. But getting to the core of what saved me in this moment when I was just falling out. And it really stems from just a time I was walking in 2004, 2 years before I become mayor of the city. I was walking in Newark with my dad around my birthday, and a shooting broke out. And I ran towards the gunfire. Off-duty police officer ran right behind me. There was a teenager that was shot. And this is one of the most gruesome, traumatizing moments of my life, because movies do not in any way capture how horrifically gruesome it is when you've gotten shot by a gun. It was just blood everywhere. And I had no training, but I just threw my hands into this boy's chest, trying to stop blood that was coming from everywhere. And I remember just screaming for people to call the ambulance, screaming the boy's name out, telling him to stay with me, but he stopped breathing. Foamy blood just started pouring from his mouth. I didn't even know, just in my shock, I just threw my hands into his mouth, trying to clear blood, thinking that maybe he would breathe. It was just awful. Finally, the paramedics come and shove me out of the way. I fall on the grass, watch them as they open his chest, go to work, lift him into an ambulance, but I knew he was dead. I came down, saw my dad. He and I didn't say a word until I just told him to go back to I was living in high-rise projects at that time. The police director who was there still tells me to this day I looked like I was in a state of shock. I don't even have a memory of how I got from there back to the projects where I live. But I do remember the moment that my dad opened the door and saw his son covered in another boy's blood. And my father, who's, some of you met him in the past, cheery, like funny. He's just such a great spirit. But at that point, he looked ashen. I couldn't even talk to him. I pushed past him. I go into the bathroom. And this is literally, I think, is my lowest moment as an American. I say that very purposely because as I was trying to scrub his blood off of me, my hands were shaking. And I still remember this moment. I look up and I saw myself in the mirror. And I just broke. And anger and hate. I just couldn't understand how this nation, where we all swear an oath to liberty and justice for all, how we could have so much injustice where children were being shot and killed in my city, and it doesn't even make the news anymore. No one seems to care. I just felt this sense of helplessness, like overwhelmed, like the problems were bigger. I'd been trying for years to stop this madness. I remember getting into the shower and running the water as hot as I could stand it, just hoping that the pain on the outside might stop the pain on the inside. I went to bed that night, and everybody, most of you in this room know there's a moment in your life where you know the definition of courage to you was not facing down some big moment in your life, some big speech, some big challenge. That often for all of us, we know that sometimes the greatest courage of our life have been that morning where you just got out of bed anyway. Despite it all, just put your feet on the ground and something helped you keep pushing forward. Well, as I was going down the elevator, I was walking through the lobby of my building, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered that the tenant president of my building, a woman 5 feet tall, tough as nails, I remembered that the lobby of my building is where her son was murdered. And yet this elderly woman never left those buildings. She and I both made enough money, we could have lived in a lot nicer housing, but she had been there for over 40 years. This elderly, wise woman, one of my greatest, I would say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark. And this woman was one of my greatest professors. She was the one that told me to get into politics, pushed me to run for city council. And so I walk out into the courtyard, feeling like I'm 100 feet underwater, screaming in my insides. And the only person early that morning in the courtyard was this elderly woman, Miss Virginia Jones. Her back was to me. And almost as if she heard my screams from the inside, she turns around and we see each other. And in that moment, like a gift from God, she did the one thing I really needed in that moment, which is no words. At that moment, all I needed was her to do this. She just opened her arms, and I ran across that courtyard like a little kid, and she hugged me and held me close, and I broke, and I just started crying out my anger, crying out my hurt. And in that moment, she just starts rubbing my back and softly says 2 words to me that gave me such comfort and direction in that moment. Just 2 words. 2 words that I would repeat as mayor on my toughest days. It would become a mantra to me. 2 words I confess to you, I say on the Senate floor sometimes where I feel like I'm banging my head against implacable walls of resistance. And there are even 2 words that have become sustaining to me in this campaign on those days I'm getting off my 3rd airplane and I'm leaning on the good energy and the kindness of the incredible people I meet in this campaign. And so as I'm sitting there crying into this elderly woman's shoulder, she's holding me, and she simply says 2 words that have nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with our civic gospel. She says over and over again, stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. The stuff of life, what has sustained this young country through bigotry and hatred, what has helped us to overcome challenges globally and here within our own borders, has been the fortitude, the ferocious love, and the faith of people who believe in our ideals even when they weren't real to them. As Langston Hughes said, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. This is the moment that we need something more than just a great 15-point policy plan. We've lost elections with better ideas before. What is calling in this moment, what got one guy up off of a couch in New Jersey in 1965, what got people in living rooms to volunteer their time for people that didn't look like them or necessarily pray like them. What is the story of every one of our family's history is that faith, is that spirit. America needs it now more than ever. The next nominee, I hope you will choose me because I believe the next nominee has got to revive those ideals of grace, of decency and love. Please caucus for me, join with me, and I promise you a movement will start in this state, and we as a nation, out of these dark times, we will bring the light and we will rise. Thank you.